Well, it's a quite a complicated chain of activity. So it starts with change happening in the real world, as you said, and then our job is to capture that change and make it as real as possible inside our content as quickly as possible. So we do that in several different ways. Perhaps the most traditional is that we've got 270 surveyors who are out in the country, in the urban areas, on the moorland of Great Britain, and each of them will have a series of tasks to complete during a day, which is sweeping their particular patch. So they get very knowledgeable about what's going on in their area, and so they will be spotting change, they will be getting information about changes, and they'll be out capturing it using their technology. The other way that we capture change is through aerial imagery. So we have a couple of aircraft that are constantly flying when the weather permits in the United Kingdom, which is not as often as we like, but they're constantly flying and capturing ground imagery. And then that is being reviewed and turned into data, which is then stored in our core data set. So there's a lot of activity going on at the front end, capturing that change, and then a lot of activity in the flow lines to take that change and put it into kind of geospatial intelligence, which we can then offer to our customers. We principally collect the geospatial data ourselves. There are a couple of areas where we work very closely with others, so particularly around our addressing work. So we work very closely with our local government colleagues, where they will have information through their electoral register, through their rates departments, their community charge departments, about changes to address data, which we can then take and put into our address base. So we work very closely with local government. We also work with local government when it comes to spotting changes. So we've got a system whereby they can report changes to us, and that then we can check that on the ground and incorporate it into our geospatial data if we find it to be true. Piece that we are most thoughtful about is then maintaining authoritative quality. So how do you signal the quality level of the data that we're presenting to our customers? And so it's something that we're thinking about, because we see that that's a source of content that we're not tapping into at the moment. So watch this space, I think. So we've got different layers, if you like. So starting with the base layer of what we call the master map, which is the core description of Great Britain. And then we've got different layers which we can put on top of that. So it could be a water layer, or it could be a transport layer, and that allows people to use the most uncluttered and the most pure view of the world that they actually need for their particular purpose. We've also got other products which we can portray, so points of interest, so banks, hospitals, supermarkets as points of interest on the map. Addresses, I've mentioned. So addresses are a very significant part of what we do, having that authoritative list of 40 million addresses, which again are changing quite frequently. So we do addressing products. I think the most interesting development is now beginning to think about individual components. So rather than it being a topographic map or a water map, we actually start breaking that down into walls or hedges or fields or boundaries, so that those can be used by different agencies. So, for example, our farmers receive some subsidies, and to get those subsidies, they've got to be we've got to have with them a very clear view of the scope of their land. And so we help the agency that's responsible for sending out those payments by ensuring that we've got the most accurate view of their land, which takes into account walls and hedges and fields and field boundaries, so that you can get a very clear view of the area being cultivated. So beginning to componentize our product, we've got something like 450, 460 million different data points, and being able to take those and use them in almost a Lego approach is something which I think will be really valuable. That could be where we get to. At the moment, it tends to be for larger users who've got a specific problem set that they're trying to solve, and so that's where we're starting. And then, as with a lot of these things, it'll move from being enterprise grade through to corporate grade, and then into consumer grade. So we'll see how that progresses. I think last year we sold something like 1.9 million paper maps, and we're continuing to innovate there as well. So while Ordnance Survey is probably very well known for its paper maps, we've moved into digital representation as well, so that if you buy a paper map, you can also get a digital download for alongside it. So for the same price, you get both paper and digital. And so that means that you can carry around on your device the digital version of the map that you've purchased. So trying to give people the best of both worlds there. So yeah, consumer mapping is about 7% of our revenues. So still material, and actually grew last year in terms of the on-take of consumer maps. Well, you're actually standing in one of the areas where we provide that support. So we're talking from the Geovation Hub, which is in the heart of London, in a kind of well-known centre for developers and development in Shoreditch. And this was an innovation we put together in July this year to bridge the gap between large companies who have got GI experts and the area where there's actually a lot of innovation, which is smaller organisations, maybe even individuals, who've got an idea which has got a geo slant to it, and they don't quite know where to start, don't know how to access the data, may need some support in interpreting it. So we set this up 4 months ago with a view to inviting in people who've got great ideas and getting them to play. And what we're hoping is that a number of those ideas will now move through the evolutionary cycle, and they'll move from being innovators, entrepreneurs, and actually into real businesses generating real income. And we've got some who are really making that transition, who are raising money, and they've moved from being in their bedrooms to actually in their offices, and it's a good success story, I think. So this is kind of one example of how we're seeking to support those small budding businesses. Increasingly, I think it will be as a service. So in much the same as any other content business, we're looking with interest at cloud, SaaS, always on, buy per sip or buy per drink rather than having to buy the entire product. So I think you'll see more and more of that kind of innovation coming, and you'll see also more flexible licensing around that as well, with more kind of usual now freemium type models, where if you're experimenting, then you should be able to access our data and experiment, and then if you, through your hard work, become a billionaire, then maybe there should be a gain share in there somewhere. So looking at far more of a traditional software content approach to how we let our content out into the world. No, I don't think so. I think the support that we provide generally is pretty good online. We've got facilities like this where people can certainly come and have a conversation, but in terms of that being a line of business for us in terms of creating new businesses, not so much. We do have a very active partner base. We do have a partner group inside Ordnance Survey that help bridge between the two organisations, or between the organisations. We've got about 350 business partners, so we're very active there, and we provide support as part of that relationship rather than as a big line of business for us. But it's back to the partnering model, that fundamentally we're a content business and our content is Great Britain. And if there are partners who feel as though that content would really work with their infrastructure or their software, then we've got an open partner program where people can join and participate at different levels, and it will be a great experience. Yes is the kind of the headline answer, and then you get into the devil in the detail, which is sharing. But what do you mean by sharing? So we will have licensing models, so that we will share for a period for free, and then we will then there will be a charging mechanism which will come into play. But in terms of the concept, absolutely, there's no point in having great content and then not liberating it and making it work. And I think that the number of geospatial answers that can be provided are just growing exponentially. So we want to participate in that, and we want to be an innovator and pioneer. And to do that, we want to work with innovators and pioneers who are also just thinking through what the next 10 years is going to bring in terms of change on the planet, and then how collectively we can help people make sense of that change. So I think there have been a number of studies kind of internally in terms of public investment and public return, and that shows a significant benefit from having a good geospatial infrastructure. I think there's worldwide level, there's also been a few studies of what's the impact of having good geospatial infrastructure and underpinnings to a country. And one of the most recent that we participated in was one which was looking at the businesses being driven by geospatial capabilities. And I think in the UK alone, if you look at all of the businesses who have got an essential dependency on geospatial, it's something like £26 billion worth of annual revenue, which is dependent on having a geospatial answer to questions. So that could be insurance, it could be transport, it could be even governmental delivery. All of those things depend on having that high quality geospatial data. So in UK it was about 26 billion, and then across the entire planet then we're looking at trillions, which are dependent on having trusted geospatial system sitting underneath it. So it's a big business, and it's kind of highly relevant to so many different other businesses that you quickly get into a very big number when it comes to the industry which is dependent on us. Then the other thing which came out of the survey was how innovative the business is, that the people doing the survey looked at the percentage of revenue driven by products which have been launched in the last 1 or 2 years, and the percentage inside geospatial was very similar to gaming industry, mobile industry. So there's a lot of innovation going on, and if you look around the room you can see there's a lot of innovation going on. So it's a very exciting industry to be part of. Well, some of it's competition, some of it's partnering, some of it's supplying. So if you look at a number of the alternate mapping sources, then they'll actually have Ordnance Survey data inside them. So our open data in particular is highly attractive and is being used by a number of these platforms. And then when it comes to when we are competing, then I think that the critical things that we bring to it is that we've got 270 surveyors, we've got people making 10,000 changes every day. It is that currency and it's the detail to which we can go, which for some use cases is essential, and for other use cases it's nice to have, and for other use cases it's not needed at all. And so we accept that there's a kind of spectrum of geospatial detail and currency, and we are very comfortable that we've got a very clear and strong part to play across that spectrum, but particularly when it's kind of life and death, when it has to be absolutely right, then you can't do better than go to the Ordnance Survey. At its most fundamental, then we're very happy and proud to be involved in a lot of education initiatives, because we're at a really golden time, I think, for geospatial, where we've got people now very used to seeing the display of geospatial information on their personal mobile device, and very used to seeing it in the car in sat-nav. So I think people have now got an awareness of geospatial as a fact of modern life, whereas probably 10, 15 years ago it was locked into, I'm going for a walk, I need a map, whereas now it's part of everyday existence. However, making that into a series of more useful use cases, businesses, we're investing in supporting education, so supporting it in the classroom, working with the Royal Geographical Society on their education initiatives, so that everyone growing up gets a really quite profound view of the value of place and making sense of data using place, which I think is going to become more and more important, because we're going to have oodles of data, and how do you make sense of it? And geospatial is one way that you make sense of it very quickly and very certainly. And if we can get people thinking about that when they are 15, 16, 17, then going to university, then coming out into the marketplace, then I think that's a good thing. So that's kind of one of the more grassroots initiatives that we're involved in. And then you've got other initiatives like this, the Geovation Hub, geospatial challenges that we run. So at the moment we've got a challenge running on water. So too much of it, too little of it, in the wrong place, wrong quality. So connecting that to geospatial as one way of beginning to make sense of those questions and those answers. So we're involved in trying to raise the awareness of geospatial and bring it into the 21st century wherever we possibly can. We have 3 or 4 different funding streams as an organisation. So we have contracts with government to provide both a general mapping service, so that emergency services, etc., they can trust the mapping data that they're using, and also with individual departments who've got particular problems that they would like solving. So that's with government. We then have businesses that we are selling our products and services to in order to help them solve their problems. So maybe an insurance company that's looking at flood risk. They want authoritative data about floodplain analysis, so we're able to help them. We have a partner community where if they're successful, we're successful. So again, that's an opportunity that we have. And then finally, we have a consumer market, which I spoke about a bit earlier in terms of the scale of that. So it's about 5 to 7% of our revenue. So we've got a number of different ways of funding the Ordnance Survey. And that allows us to do a couple of things. One is it relieves the pressure on our government to have to fund the whole of Ordnance Survey. So they fund about 55 or 60% of the costs of Ordnance Survey. And the second thing it does is it allows us to give away some data for free. So by the fact that we've made money, we're then able to give some of the data back into the community. And so we're doing more and more of that. We had a big free data release in earlier in the year, in the spring, and we're thinking of different ways of doing more of that in the future. So it's just a different model, and it's whatever works both politically and financially and socially in whatever territory you're in. So it may not work for others, but it's certainly working here in GB.